American pressure on Israel, not Israel, while visiting Israel, and unacceptable to Israel, to the land of Israel.
Welcome to Eyes on Israel. I'm Rabbi Pesach Wolicki. In March 2018, President Donald Trump signed into law the Taylor Force Act, or TFA, a law named for Taylor Force, an American veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan who was murdered by a terrorist in the city of Jaffa in 2016 while on a visit to Israel. The Palestinian Authority, under the leadership of Mahmoud Abbas, immediately began paying the family of the murderer. Paying large lifetime rewards to the families of terrorist murderers has been the policy of the Palestinian Authority since its inception. The U.S. State Department estimates that in 2019, for example, the PA paid out $340 million to terrorists and their families under this policy. The Taylor Force Act requires the U.S. to withhold all economic aid to the Palestinian Authority so long as they continue this pay-for-slay program. In August 2018, in the first round of enforcement, the Trump administration cut hundreds of millions of dollars in aid. Then, in February 2019, they ceased all aid to the PA as per the TFA. After this decision, something amazing happened. Terrorism declined. Less Israelis were being murdered. In the 5-year period, 2014 to 18, 100 Israelis and visitors to Israel were murdered by terrorists, an average of 20 per year, with a low of 14 in 2018, the year the TFA became law. In 2019, the first year of TFA enforcement, the number of murder victims fell to 11, and in 2020 it fell further to 3. But it's not just about the money. Terrorist murders in Israel were on the decline ever since Donald Trump took office. From 2014 to 2018, the two lowest annual numbers of victims of terror in Israel were 2017 and 18, the first 2 years of the Trump administration. Even before the passage of the TFA, Donald Trump's policies and statements sent a clear message to Israel's enemies that under his administration, terrorism would not be rewarded. Shortly after taking office, on March 26, 2021, the Biden administration announced that it would be sending $75 million to the Palestinian Authority to, quote, regain the trust and goodwill, end quote, of the PA in the wake of the Trump cuts in aid. The Biden State Department said at the time that this was only the beginning of a renewed pledge to support the PA, and to date, the Biden administration has given over $1 billion to the Palestinian Authority. What happened next should not surprise anyone. 2021 saw 17 Israelis murdered by Arab terrorists, the highest number since 2015, before the Trump administration. And all these murders were after the renewal of American aid at the end of March, a full quarter into the year. Not surprisingly, 2022 saw yet another rise, with 31 people losing their lives to terrorist murderers. And 2023 was deadlier than 2022, even before October 7th. So how is this happening? The Taylor Force Act is not just a Trump-era policy or a presidential executive order that can easily be reversed by the next administration. The Taylor Force Act is law, passed by both houses and signed by the president. Simply put, the Biden administration is breaking the law. And now, with Israel destroying Hamas, Joe Biden and his Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, are insisting that the Palestinian Authority, who pays terrorist murderers, be invited in to govern the Gaza Strip when the war is over. The inescapable conclusion we must draw from all this is that the current U.S. administration, through its criminal violation of U.S. law, is indirectly, yet knowingly, funding the families of terrorists with U.S. taxpayer dollars. They are incentivizing the murder of Israeli citizens. Joining me now is Stuart Force, Taylor Force's father, who has been watching this troubling situation closely. Stuart Force, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be on your program. Truly is. and the timing is quite appropriate. On Friday marks 8 years since we lost Taylor to
Wow.
the terrorist act, and we're
So,
still.
Stuart, so tell us a bit about how the Taylor Force Act came to be, and what are your thoughts on the violation, the criminal violation of that act by the Biden administration?
Well, the short version of how it came to be occurred shortly after we lost Taylor. The summer of 2016, we were contacted by a gentleman that we did not know, Sandra Gerber, who has since become a true friend of the Force family. He shared with us a video of the Palestinians celebrating the death of our son on the in Jaffa. And he also shared a PDF showing exactly how the Palestinian Authority rewarded their terrorists through the Pay for Slave program for murdering, injuring innocent civilians in Israel. So he put us in touch with Senator Graham, who was our senator in South Carolina at the time, and he took it from there. Next thing we knew, we were in Washington, D.C. at a press conference and announcing the introduction of the Taylor Force Act, which, as you said, stops the payment to the Palestinian authorities until they renounce terrorism, stop the payments, and remove the pay for slave from their books.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. American taxpayer dollars shouldn't be funding the families of terrorist murderers. I mean, that seems pretty straightforward. So, ever since the Biden administration, as I detailed in my opening monologue, ever since the Biden administration got into power, they've been violating the Taylor Force Act, an open violation of U.S. law. So, I understand that you're doing something about it. Can you tell our viewers what's happening on that front?
Yes, we are actively pursuing federal complaints in the Northern District Court of Texas, asking to cease and desist the violation of the Taylor Force Act. We got, with the support of Congressman Ronnie Jackson from Texas and the leadership of America First Legal, we are asking for them to address the situation. And we got a pretty good news earlier this year when the judge in the matter said that indeed we did have standing, which is an important prerequisite for the lawsuit to continue. We're now following through on that, getting depositions, and hopefully as a result of this lawsuit, these withholding of money sent to Palestinian Authority will resume. One point to be made, the money that was withheld goes into escrow so that if the Palestinian Authority does indeed stop paying terrorists and ends their program, they would get this money back. However, they have shown no inclination to do either. The administration's attempt to gain the trust and goodwill of the Palestinian Authority is rather laughable. They are not trustworthy, nor do they exhibit any goodwill towards any other entity.
Yeah, and we now know as well that the atrocities committed on October 7th were not only committed by Hamas, but it's recently come out that there were operatives who were members of Fatah. And for those who don't know, Fatah is the faction that is Mahmoud Abbas's faction, essentially the Palestinian Authority faction within the Palestinian population, who also participated in those atrocities. And just about 2 weeks ago, there was a terrorist attack committed by someone who worked for the security services of the Palestinian Authority. People need to understand that when we talk about a moderate Palestinian leadership in Mahmoud Abbas, there's nothing of the sort. These are supporters of terrorism. Have you received any feedback or any response from the administration to this complaint, to this lawsuit, or have they just ignored it thus far?
No, they have not ignored it. They have filed motions to dismiss on various grounds, and up to this point, the judge has ruled that their motions have no validity, and we're proceeding forward. And I might add one other item that with the admission that UNRWA, the United Nations organization, is deeply embedded in Hamas and terror activities. That is also will be included in our efforts to cease funding of these organizations. The administration, I've asked several times to different webinars and people that know what information is the Biden administration basing this giveaway of American tax dollars? What information do they have that the rest of us don't have that this will affect peace in the region? And everybody to a person says they have no idea why the administration is doing this. And that's pretty disheartening.
It certainly is. Well, Stuart Force, thank you so much for joining us. All I could say about this is another example, just like the border, of the Biden administration brazenly ignoring the law, the stated will of the people of the United States when it doesn't fit with their policy goals. They keep screaming about democracy while they openly violate the law. Stuart Force, the nation of Israel shares in your pain for the loss of your son, but at the same time, we are grateful to you and your family as your son's name has become synonymous with a law designed to protect Israeli lives. So thank you and bless you for all that you're doing. We'll be right back with more Eyes on Israel right after this short break. Welcome back to Eyes on Israel, powered by Israel 365. Make sure to visit Israel365.com to check out all the fantastic Israel-related content on offer there. Follow Israel365 on Rumble and YouTube, and be sure to follow me at RabbiPW on Getter and X. Also, make Israel365news.com the place that you go to get accurate news and analysis about Israel, including my weekly writings. 1 month prior to the October 7th attacks, a Pew Research Center poll found that 65% of Israelis, including 59% of Arab Israelis, oppose a two-state solution, meaning the creation of a Palestinian state alongside Israel. And polling conducted after October 7th shows that 75% of Arabs, Palestinians in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip also oppose a two-state solution. In other words, we're talking about a quote-unquote solution that no one on either side actually supports. Now, the two sides don't want a two-state solution for very different reasons. Israel wants a one-state solution that includes an Arab minority that has full civil rights and civil autonomy to run their own affairs if they show a desire to live peacefully among Israelis, just like our Arab Israeli citizens do. And the Palestinians want a one-state solution that includes no Jews at all. It's the height of arrogance by the Biden administration and other voices in the world calling for a solution that no one in the conflict actually wants. Stop the average person in the street and ask, "Are you in favor of a two-state solution?" And they'll say, "Yeah, sure, of course, sounds nice. You know, two states, two peoples, everyone's happy, two's a nice number." But if you ask just a few simple questions, you realize very quickly how out of touch with reality the whole two-state solution is. For example, who would be governing this Palestinian state? Well, according to Joe Biden and Blinken, it would be Mahmoud Abbas and Fatah, what's known as the Palestinian Authority, or PA, the group that currently rules the Arab areas of Judea and Samaria, what's called the West Bank. Sound good? Well, first of all, the PA, like Hamas, teaches children hatred of Jews and calls for the destruction of Israel. Mahmoud Abbas himself is a Holocaust denier. And as we discussed earlier in the show, the Palestinian Authority pays stipends to terrorist murderers and their families. The idea that Mahmoud Abbas would be the head of any kind of state is absurd. But let's go a little further. Mahmoud Abbas was elected to a 4-year term in 2006, and there has not been an election since. And the reason there hasn't been an election in 18 years is that in 2006, Hamas won control of the Gaza Strip, and all polling since shows that if there were a free and fair election in the West Bank, that Hamas would win overwhelmingly there as well. Support for Abbas and his Fatah party, the people Biden and Blinken want to install as leaders of a Palestinian state, according to recent polling, is at about 14%. So, are we talking about a democratic Palestinian state? Who's governing this Palestinian state? Is it a democracy? Will it advocate peaceful relations with Israel? If so, how will this be achieved? Is it demilitarized? Once you ask these questions, you realize that the concept is absurd. One last point. From a moral perspective, should the result of the October 7th massacre be that we reward these people with a state? How does that discourage terrorism? I recently sat down with Ambassador David Friedman, who served as U.S. Ambassador to Israel in the Trump administration, and with the Dean of the Robertson School of Government at Regent University, Michelle Bachmann, to talk about this issue.
Michelle, right now, the world community, the international community, is pressuring Israel to accept what they call a two-state solution. And here in America, while the overwhelming majority of Americans are supportive of Israel, there are still a great many Americans who, while they say they support Israel, still think that a two-state solution is a good idea. What are they missing? What are they not understanding? What is wrong with a two-state solution?
Well, the current two-state solution that's being forced upon Israel is a violation of the Oslo Agreement, because from the gate, the Biden administration is saying that they're going to negotiate an ending, and Israel is rendered irrelevant. Israel isn't even a part of this. They're left out of the picture. That's abhorrent. You can't do that. Israel was the one that was attacked on October 7th, and it isn't just October 7th. Israelis are attacked on a daily basis, whether it's stabbings, being shot, having a run over by a car. This is a continual effort. So if there is a two-state solution today, the second state would be a terror state. Why in the world would terrorists be rewarded with a terror state? And why in the world would Israel have to be in a situation where her neighbor that surrounds her, financed by Iran, who seeks to annihilate Israel, is adamantly working to bring about genocide of the Jewish people? That is the goal, the genocide of the Jewish people. That is the priority even over the land, to kill as many Jews as possible. The United States should have nothing to do with this.
Ambassador Friedman, in the Trump administration, you were a key figure in changing the paradigm of how to view the Middle East. The paradigm that we inherited for decades from, admittedly, both parties was that the way to peace is to appease our enemies. And the Trump administration came in and strengthened America's friends and sought a true lasting peace based on that construct. Where do we go from here? So many people ask us, those of us who are opposed to a two-state solution, what is the solution? What do you suggest?
Well, first of all, with regard to just the politics of it all, we did two things that were reversed when we left office. One was, when we left office, Iran was on the verge of bankruptcy, and we cut off funding to the PA and to UNRWA. Biden has made Iran a very wealthy country. He's not enforcing any sanctions, and he turned on the funds for the PA and for UNRWA, which we now learn has become an arm of Hamas. And so, in essence, it lubricated the terror mechanisms to get us to where we are today. What we're seeing now, in terms of what is the solution, we're seeing something very interesting now. We're seeing the intersection of theology and geopolitics converging. Okay, the theology has been around for thousands of years. That hasn't changed. The theology, as some of the prior guests have said, is that God wants the Jewish people to live in the land of Israel. And to this day, places like the most obvious biblical sites, Hebron, Shiloh, Beit El, Beit Lechem, are not...
And even the old city of Jerusalem?
Even the old city of Jerusalem are not considered by the world. Not considered by the State Department, except to the extent that Pompeo and I were able to change that a little bit, don't consider a part of Israel. So there's a huge gap in the difference between the state of Israel and biblical Israel, and the theology is, of course, that Israel should have sovereignty over all of it, as God promised to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. I mean, the covenants were discussed on a prior session. They're permanent. They're irrevocable. Now you have the geopolitics, right? And as I used to say, the two-state solution is the mother's milk of American politics. By the way, Republicans and Democrats as well, before we came into office. What's happening now is people finally understand that a two-state solution is wrong, because the people who would, as Michelle just said, the people who would occupy that second state, it's really a third state, right? Because there is a Palestinian state in Jordan, right, which is 72% of mandatory Palestine, and the population is mostly Palestinian. But this second Palestinian state would be populated by people who are capable, willing, and able to commit the types of massacres that occurred on October 7th. And so I think now people are starting to say, we really can't have a two-state solution, not because of the theology, because they didn't accept the theology from the start, but we understand that to put a terror state smack between Israel and Jordan within short distances of all of Israel's major population centers would be an existential threat. As people say, the two-state solution would become the final solution for the Jewish people. And so we're at a very important time, because, like I've always believed in the theology. My political views were not accepted by most of the world, certainly not in the U.S. government, and certainly not in places like the EU. But that's starting to change. And I think we have an opportunity, as horrible a price as we all paid for October 7th and all of the tragedies that continue, with people continue to be suffering. But there is at least clarity now that we haven't had before. Even people who were trying to fit that square peg into the round hole for so many years, for 50 years, they realize it can't be done. And so I think the solution, the solution is Israeli sovereignty. I mean, Israeli, and I don't want to monopolize our conversation, but the solution is Israeli sovereignty. Both because it's interesting. It's God's will, and what's objectively the best for everybody is now exactly in the same place, right? God's will is that Israel should have sovereignty over all the land, but that's the best thing that could happen to the Palestinian people, the ones that don't want to be at war with Israel. Those who want to be at war with Israel have to complete the war and win. But those that don't want to be at war with Israel, who are they going to partner with? They're going to partner with Jordan, with Egypt, with Lebanon, with Syria. These are countries with GDP per capita of $3,000 or $4,000. Israel is like 15 times, more prosperous a nation. So why would they want to? The Palestinians, if they're going to be prosperous and nonviolent, okay, they have to find a way to live in peace with Israel. Now, look, there's only room for one Jewish state in the world. I mean, there's 30 Muslim states. There's room in the world for one Jewish state. You can't allow Palestinians to demographically destroy the state of Israel any more than you would allow them to militarily destroy the state of Israel. So, the governance is complicated. They can't vote in national elections. It's just not workable. But that's okay. I mean, every other country in the Middle East isn't even a democracy. I mean, we're not dealing with, we got to get past, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams here. We can I think we can encourage Israel to assert its sovereignty over the entirety of biblical Israel. Okay. Treat, with the help, hopefully, of the Abraham Accord countries as it could be expanded, with their help, with their funding, help create a better life for the Palestinians. You achieve God's will, you achieve the human dignity that every human being deserves, and you get past this idea of creating a terror state that will just, perpetuate violence and misery.
Two-state solution? More like two-state delusion. You can find the rest of this fascinating conversation with Ambassador Friedman and Dean Bachman on the Israel 365 Rumble and YouTube channels. We'll be right back in a few minutes. Welcome back. On October 7th, Hamas invaded southern Israel. They committed a wide range of atrocities, mass murdering 1,200 people and raping and torturing countless others. They also took 253 hostages. These hostages included men, women, the elderly, and even children. Israel declared war on Hamas and made it clear soon after that one of the primary goals of the war was the return of all the hostages. By mid-February, 112 of the hostages had been released. almost all of those during a temporary ceasefire agreement in late November. In addition to those released, the bodies of 11 hostages who were killed in Gaza have been recovered by Israel. Among the hostages taken on October 7th is the Bibas family. That's right, a family. Father Yarden, mother Shiri, a 4-year-old boy named Ariel, and a 9-month-old infant named Kfir. That's right, Hamas took this entire family into captivity. To top it off, Hamas murdered Shiri's father and wife. According to the November ceasefire hostage deal, all the children who are being held were supposed to be released. But Hamas did not release the Bibas family. Instead, they claimed that they were killed during an IDF airstrike, while providing no evidence to support this claim. Hamas also filmed Yarden, who was separated from his wife and children, and they filmed him being told that his family was killed, and they later released the video. On February 19th, the IDF presented family members with a video showing that Shiri and the children were still alive after being abducted. To date, there's no further information, but it should be noted that while Israel is wrongfully accused of war crimes on a daily basis in the international media, the abduction and keeping of hostages is an explicit violation of international law. The international laws of combat state that during an armed conflict, it is forbidden to take hostages. This is defined by the International Committee of the Red Cross as, quote, the seizure, detention, or otherwise holding of a person, the hostage, accompanied by the threat to kill, injure, or continue to detain that person in order to compel a third party, in this case Israel, to do or to abstain from doing any act as an explicit or implicit condition for the release, safety, or well-being of the hostage. This describes the situation of the Hamas hostages perfectly. And Hamas, even though they are not technically a state organization, are still bound by these laws. Targeting, murdering, and abducting civilians are all part of the many war crimes committed by Hamas on and since October 7th. As the months pass, many of us tend to think of what happened that day as a past event, something that took place then, months ago. But for the hostages and their families, the atrocities of October 7th, the suffering, the pain, the anguish, continue every single day. Joining me now is Yossi Schneider, a cousin of Shiri Bibas, who has been leading the campaign to save his family. Yossi, welcome to Eyes on Israel. How are you?
Hi. I know the better days than today.
Yeah, it's a tough time.
Yeah.
So tell me, since October 7th, you have been leading the charge for your family to try to get more information, to try to pressure international governments. Tell our viewers a bit about what those efforts have looked like and where things stand today.
It's extremely difficult. It's extremely. I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed of the government of my country. I'm ashamed of all the governments all over the world. I'm ashamed for the Red Cross and all the other human organization, the Me Too, the child organization. Everybody just keeping silence. Everybody's just, they're making excuses, they're making promises, but nobody actually does anything. Everybody's hugging us and making sad faces, but nobody actually does anything. And it's been more than 5 months since my family just disappeared in Gaza. And we have zero information about Shiri and the kids. In the 18th of January, we marked Kfir's first birthday. It was so many events all over the world to mention his birthday. And over here in Israel, we went to the Kidnap Square and thousands of people came and we released balloons and cakes and presents and everything. We did everything that we could to celebrate his birthday, but we just missed one thing, and it's the birthday boy. He wasn't here. So I cannot explain how difficult the situation is right now. It's been so long. So many interviews, so many traveling all over the world. so many meeting with diplomats and everybody, and just nothing.
So, with the negotiations that have been ongoing, and they're still having them, trying to talk about a ceasefire and another hostage exchange, when you look at governments like the government of Qatar specifically, who, unlike Iran, that we don't have any ongoing relations with, Iran doesn't have any real diplomatic relations with the Western world. Qatar is considered by the United States to be an ally, and they're deeply involved in these negotiations. Have you reached out at all or been able to reach out at all to the Qatari government or to the Egyptians who are also on the other side of these negotiations and have direct contact with Hamas?
One of my family members been in Qatar and meet with the president of Qatar, with the prime minister. But the problem is that the world doesn't understand who we're dealing with. The world doesn't understand that we're dealing with a terror organization, a radical terror organization that doesn't want to make peace with us, that is enjoying the pictures that coming out from Gaza right now because it's using them as a propaganda for the world to hate us. They doesn't understand that they don't want to release anybody, that they don't care that the citizens is being killed. Because when in the beginning of this war, they've been asked why don't they let their citizens to go down to the tunnels and protect them, and they said out loud in the media that the citizens they are not their problem, it's the problem of the UN, and the UN should take care of them. For them, it's just everybody's like a pawn in a game. Everybody's a playing card, and they're using everybody. And when you go to a state like Qatar, that actually they working in a double standard, because in one end, okay, they're trying to get some kind of a negotiation and try to bring the hostages back, but in the second end, they're still letting Ania live in Qatar in a 5-star hotel, and they're still giving money to organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah and the other organization. So you cannot play a double role. You have to decide in which side you are. Or you're the west side of the world right now, and you want a real peace and a real progress, or you are with all this terror organization. You're giving them money and giving them support and giving them shelters.
Yeah, look, I've no illusions, and I don't think any of us have any illusions about the Qataris, about where their motives really lie. They've been funding terrorism all over the world for years. It's just that they have a working relationship with the United States. Have you received any helpful responses at all from American officials? I'm sure you've been in touch with the United States.
We've been in touch with everybody, but the problem is that the only person that we want to meet, what we need to meet with him, is Biden, and because we don't have an American citizen, so he's not willing to meet us, even though.
Wow.
I'm telling all over the world, my family is not more unique than the other families. Okay, Shiri is not more important than the other hostages, but our story is more unique because we are the only 2 children that is still in captivity. Kfir is the smallest baby that ever been kidnapped, and because that story is so unique, and because we're suffering for so long, I think even though I'm not an American, he should do this the small thing and just meet with us for a couple of minutes and just hear our story and know that Kfir and Ariel and Shiri and Yarden and all the other hostages, they are not a story, they are not a picture. They are real families, they are our families, they are our children, they are our grandfathers and uncles and brothers and sisters, and he needs to know that.
So, Yossi, I know that you and I have spoken before this interview, and I know that this situation has also caused a great economic toll, a financial toll on your family. If you could just take, a minute and tell our viewers what those challenges are like, and then maybe we can get everyone to pitch in and help out.
Unfortunately, the 7th of October, as you said, Shiri been kidnapped with the kids in Yarden, and her parents been murdered. So there is no first relative that can represent her in the world. She has only one sister, and her sister is just she's not she can't do anything. She's at home all the time. She's trying to live her life, but she cannot be in interview. So me and a couple of person in my family just needed to stop work. Unfortunately, we can't walk, we cannot do anything because we need to be on it 24/7. As I told you in the beginning, we've been interviewed all over the world, we've been traveled all over the world. Sometimes I'm telling to myself, okay, you have to go back to real life, you have to go back to work. And as soon as I'm getting back to my office, I'm getting a phone call for somebody that tell me that, okay, you have an appointment with some diplomat or with some media. And it's always the question of who I'm gonna take care of. My family, I have 4 children, okay, or to go to this interview and speak for Shiri. And it's really our decision to make. But there is nobody that can help Shiri. If we stop doing that, everybody will forget her. Everybody will forget the kids. So we have to continue doing whatever we're doing.
Yossi, our prayers are with you, our thoughts are with you, and I'd like to tell our entire audience, go to the website helpisraelihostages.com. It's a new website we just set up to help the Bibas family, helpisraelihostages.com, and do your part to help out. Thank you very much, Yossi Schneider. Welcome back. Each Saturday, as part of the Shabbat morning synagogue service, a Torah scroll, handwritten on parchment, is brought out of the ark at the front of the synagogue, and the weekly Torah portion is read. These weekly portions cover the entire 5 books of Moses, the first 5 books of the Bible, in order over the course of each year. This annual cycle of readings begins with the opening chapters of Genesis on the first Saturday after the Feast of Tabernacles, and concludes with the final verses of Deuteronomy on the last day of that festival a year later. But there are a few weeks in the year, a few Shabbats, when in addition to the weekly Torah portion, another passage from the Torah is read, added on after the weekly portion. These additional readings are chosen because of their connection to significant events on the Jewish calendar that will be taking place in the week that follows. This coming Saturday is an example. It is the Shabbat before the festival of Purim. Purim, of course, commemorates the victory of the Jews over a genocidal enemy led by Haman, as recorded in the book of Esther. So, on the Sabbath prior to Purim each year, in addition to this week's weekly portion from the closing chapters of the book of Exodus, it happens to be this week, synagogues around the world will read the following passage from Deuteronomy. Remember what Amalek did to you on the way as you were coming out of Egypt, how he met you on the way and attacked you in the back, all the stragglers at your rear, when you were tired and weary, and he did not fear God. Therefore, it shall be when the Lord your God has given you rest from your enemies all around you, in the land which the Lord your God is giving you to possess as an inheritance, that you must blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. You shall not forget. In these verses, Moses commands the children of Israel to eternally remember what Amalek did to them. Back in the book of Exodus, 40 years before Deuteronomy, just after the children of Israel left Egypt, Amalek attacked Israel. As we read there in Exodus 18, Amalek came and fought with Israel in Rephidim. And Moses said to Joshua, "Choose us some men and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand." So Joshua did as Moses said to him and fought Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And so it was when Moses held up his hand that Israel prevailed, and when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. Moses' hands became heavy, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and one on the other. And his hands were steady until the sun set. So Joshua defeated Amalek and his people by the edge of the sword. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Write this for a memorial in the book and recount it in the ears of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under the heavens." And Moses built an altar, and he called it, "The Lord is my banner." And he said, "Because the Lord has sworn that the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation." I want to draw your attention to the opening words of this passage I just read, the beginning of this episode. Amalek came and fought with Israel. Where'd they come from? Why doesn't the Bible simply say Amalek attacked Israel? What the Bible is telling us is that Amalek did not attack Israel because Israel had approached their territory. The children of Israel were nowhere near the territory of Amalek. The Amalekites traveled out into the desert to attack Israel for no reason. Israel posed no threat to them and had not provoked them. So why did Amalek attack? To answer that question, let's ask another question. What was Amalek thinking? Think about it. The Egyptian superpower had just been decimated by 10 miraculous plagues. Blood, frogs, you know the list. Then to top it off, God split the Red Sea, saving Israel and drowning the Egyptian army in the most overtly supernatural display of divine power ever seen. Why on earth would Amalek attack Israel at that moment? Did they really think they were going to defeat the God of Israel after what he had just done to Egypt? The answer is that Amalek believed in chance and coincidence. They believed that while there is a God, God's will is random and subject to chance, that God doesn't really direct things down here on earth. The fact that God saved Israel on one day says nothing about what will happen on the next. The possibility that God directs the course of history, the history of a specific people, to bring holiness into the world was repugnant to Amalek. To put this another way, the only way to explain the irrational audacity of Amalek in attacking Israel immediately after the Exodus is to conclude that they did not believe that God had any providential relationship with Israel. And this is what makes Amalek Israel's arch enemy. The primary purpose of the nation of Israel is to be a vehicle for the revelation of God in this world. In other words, Israel's purpose is not Israel. Israel's purpose is that God reveals himself through Israel by directing our history in miraculous ways. The Egyptians who witnessed the 10 plagues recognized God through his redemption of Israel. You see that in the book of Exodus. Similarly, in our time, the unprecedented, biblically foretold, miraculous return of the nation of Israel to our land testifies to God's control over history. But not everyone sees it that way. The enemies of Israel do not see the ingathering of millions of Jews to Israel as the fulfillment of God's biblical promises. To them, God's not involved in history at all. To believe that God has no special concern for Israel and that whatever happens in history is due to human action and chance is the essence of Amalek. As our passage puts it, they had no fear of God. Many people today say they believe in God, but they don't really believe that he directs history. They don't fear him. Like Amalek, Israel's enemies of today, Hamas, Hezbollah, and their allies on the progressive left, deny the truth of the God of Israel. They refuse to accept the possibility that God's biblical promises are being fulfilled on this earth. So they attack us. They attack us for the same reason Amalek attacked us over 3,300 years ago. They attack us to show the world that there's nothing special about Israel, that the God of the Bible does not govern history. I mentioned the fact that Amalek was attacking Israel immediately after God had just utterly decimated Egypt in the most miraculous way, and how irrational that was. We have to assume that Amalek was ready for the possibility that God would lash out at them just as he did to the Egyptians. And yet they were still willing to attack. The Amalekites, it would appear, were the first suicide bombers, terrorists who went out of their way to attack Israel, even though they knew that there was a high likelihood that they'd be killed in the process. For all these reasons, Amalek represents the evil in humanity, the desire to kill in the name of defeating the God and people of Israel. We read this passage right before the festival of Purim, not only to remind us that history repeats itself, that we have genocidal enemies. Notice that God did not wipe out the Amalekites with miracles like the 10 plagues or the splitting of the sea. Instead, God told Moses to tell Joshua to get men to fight. And the message could not be clearer. When evil rears its head, God-fearing people are called upon to wage war to defeat it. In the words of Moses to Joshua, choose men and go out and fight Amalek. Folks, the Bible's coming to life before our very eyes. Words written thousands of years ago describe the headlines of the day. And today, just as in the time of the book of Exodus and the book of Esther, Israel faces enemies who refuse to acknowledge the God of the Bible, the God of Israel. And just as it was in those times, Israel will win. The enemies of Israel always lose in the end. And just like the Bible says, the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. In other words, the battle against evil is eternal. No generation is exempt from fighting it. If you enjoyed this teaching, if you found it meaningful, check out my author page at Israel365.com and be sure to get a copy of my latest book of Bible teachings, Verses for Zion. Verses for Zion contains 77 short, daily devotion-length Bible studies, each one only a few pages long, where I use insights from the original Hebrew to draw out inspiring lessons from the scriptures that are lost to those who read the Bible only in English translation. So go to getvfz.com to purchase your copy. You'll get 20% off at checkout. This book's not available on Amazon. The only way to get it, once again, is getvfz, Verses for Zion, getvfz.com. Folks, this brings us to the end of the show, the debut episode of Eyes on Israel. Thank you so much for watching. God bless, and be sure to catch us next week and every week right here on Real America's Voice.